Hello, my friends. So, I have three decks I want to share with you tonight, and they're all very different. Two of them have been around for a while, and one of them is kind of a curiosity. It's also been around for a while, but I haven't heard of it, and it was an eBay find, and it was something I sort of found and bid on a whim, and then lost at the last minute. Someone came in and swooped in and outbid me, literally in the last minute of the auction. And then I did that to someone else last week because another one came up. And actually, there's one, it looks like there's one out there now. So I don't know that this deck is hard to get, except that I've only seen it on eBay through this one seller. And I had not heard of it before a random check of just sort of looking through eBay. So this is it. It's called Tarot Piatnik Wien. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's mostly so the cards are in the box is in German. The cards look like they're in French, and the little white book is in English. But in none of those at any point does it describe the deck, the artist, or talk about who made it and why. I would imagine that it was a commission from Piatnik, but there's not even any copyright information on it. On the bottom of the box, there's just, it just says Piatnik number 2825. The sides of the box don't say anything. The back of the box is in German. At some point, I should plug this into Google Translate. I was even dubious as to whether this was a legitimate deck. Legitimately. So I looked, and this is on the Eclectic Tarot forum website. Excuse me. And it lists as a deck from the 70s that's out of print. And I haven't seen it anywhere else. That said, I found it on eBay. There's obviously a couple copies, at least from this one seller. I don't know anything about it. Other than that, I was really attracted to the sort of like busyness of the artwork, which I quite like. So I'm going to do a little walkthrough of it. It's a pip deck, so it won't take too long. And the other decks, I'm not going to do full walkthroughs of. I just want to sort of talk about them because they've come into my life and I'm sort of happy to have them. So, again, this is the tarot. It's a Piatnik deck. It says it's from the 70s. There's a little scuffing on the box. And it's clearly not new. It doesn't necessarily, like, it doesn't smell like it's from the 70s. Or certainly if it is, it's been well cared for. The box is not like a modern box. Like, it's got sort of a rough cardboard interior. It's not like the kind of glossy white bleached boxes that we're used to. That's what the card backs look like. So it's it's sort of, normally this kind of is not attractive to me, but I kind of like it. I mean, there's something kind of kitschy about it that I like, and I just sort of, it reminds me of my Taroki Corte Taroki, which I love, and that deck kind of made me okay with, I don't normally like advertising on the back. So this is the little white book. It says literally nothing. It does have, you can sort of see, I don't know if you can see in the lighting. I mean, there's definitely some age. Let me zoom in. Let's see. There's some age, but it's hard to gauge. There's not even a copyright date in the book. So let me zoom out. So yeah, that's the deck. So I'm gonna do a little walkthrough, just quickly. It's a pip deck. It's really thick. It doesn't feel like modern cardstock. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm guessing it is legit. The cards were wrapped. I mean, it wasn't like the way we wrap cards now in like a whole thing. There was like a plastic sleeve and it was divided in half. The deck was not in order when I opened it up. So I was actually slightly worried that it wasn't it wasn't complete, but it is. So I put it in order. So I've actually looked at it. I really, really, really like it. So there are two sort of spread cards that I need to plug into Google Translate and see what they tell me, unless someone who's watching this speaks German. So we have, it looks like spreads. And then we get into the deck itself. It's not for everybody. It's a fairly loud deck, sort of art-wise. I wonder if I should zoom in for this too. Yeah, that's probably a little better. There's some text on some of the majors, but not a whole lot. I just really like it. So it's primarily very Marseille-ish in terms of its representation, but then we get very, very... Some of them are sort of Rider-Waite, and some of them are just completely out of left field. The Papist says Juno on it, which is kind of a French tradition, if I'm not mistaken, or sort of French-speaking tradition. The Empress. I mean, there's sort of a primitive style to it. It's probably not for everybody. They're very loud. They're very busy. But I like it a lot. And that was how I sort of ended up in a bidding war with somebody. So we've got the Pope, listed as Jupiter. Again, it's I don't know if it's French. I don't retain all these details of things, but it's definitely a tradition where the Pope and the Popess are replaced by Juno and Jupiter. Sorry, I have this tendency to chew ice, which drives people nuts. So we've got kind of a Marseille, kind of a Rider-Waite Smith here with the sort of supplicants in this little box. It also seems like there's some intent that there be associations that are esoteric. Every once in a while you'll find sort of a Star of David. This is the Lover. The cardstock is thick, but it's like it's really cardboardy. Like the back feels really sort of matte, almost like the Wild Unknown, and the front is sort of more like a cardboard from like a children's book. It's hard to describe. It's really unusual. Yeah, I mean it doesn't smell like it's been sitting in a basement, but it also doesn't smell like it just rolled out of the factory. I really like this Chariot. Justice. So you see there is some symbolism that's not, Marseille. I love this Hermit. I like this Wheel of Fortune. I've talked about this before. Wheel of Fortune is not a card I love. The Force card, the Strength card, is interesting because we have a woman and a lion, but then there are these faces in the lion, and the faces on the eyes sort of look like fish, but then we also have a strong man. So there's this interesting marriage of sort of old and new. I mean, this Death card is so rock and roll. It looks like the cover of a punk, a punk album from the 80s. Temperance. This Devil card I think is really cool. The Tower. It's not a deck you look at and you immediately go like, oh, I can see, this is busy, but there's something about it that I really like, you know what I mean? There's life and energy in it. And there's also sort of a primitive style to the art, which I find charming. The closest thing I can think of is the Circo Tarot. Just in terms of the human figures on it. So it's definitely not a quiet, gentle deck, but I feel like it's vivacious. It's not loud in a nasty way. It's not yelling. It's just singing, It's not humming. It's not quiet. So those are the majors. And then the pips are pips. But one thing I like about the pips, too, that's interesting, and, I don't read playing cards, but all of the pips have the playing card suit in the corners. They're color-coded, and they keep going number-wise, so it's interesting that way. And the order, I put these in the order that I use them. That's clearly not the order they intended them to be. I didn't really look at that. So, but the pips, this is the wands. So the wands and the swords are not Marseille wands and swords. You know what I mean? They're very different. They're a little bit more, in a way, like the Sforza, Visconti Sforza. But they're not, it's not, like the symbol is repeated, but it's Marseille, like in the arabesques and the decorations that differ and that have, an energy of their own, which I really like. So here's the Valet de Bâton, the Knight. So now we get into cups. So the cups have hearts in the corners. As you saw, the color scheme for the wands was sort of this pink and green, and the cups is sort of the inverse of that. It's sort of red and green. But you get the hearts. So again, this is more Marseille style cups wise. The arrangement feels a lot more like the Marseille. The coins are similar, the denier. I really like the sort of shape of this deck. I mean, it's not that different from a tarot deck that we're familiar with. It feels a touch longer than we're used to in terms of like mass-produced decks, but it's definitely got an attractive size to me. It's not, if you can see this too, like the some of the edges on the cards aren't quite finished, but still a fan. So here's the Court of Cups. So now we get into swords. So the swords have a yellow and black scheme. The swords almost feel like they're on a chalkboard, which I kind of enjoy. So again, not like in the Marseille style of like the curved, sort of Middle Eastern swords. These are swords as we know them. But again, arranged, thoughtfully. They're not super. It's not like a random just sort of tossing in of the elements. They're Marseille in that way, that the sort of placement of them feels like they have an energy about them. And the Court of Swords. Whoops. I get so excited. So the Queen of Swords, the King of Swords. And then here's the suit of coins. Whoops. So there we have it. So I don't think the cardstock is so, and it's sort of a long deck, and the cardstock is so thick I don't think I could get a good riffle shuffle out of it. I'm going to zoom out. But it it has a very sort of satisfying weight to it. It has a quality. So in terms of overhand shuffling, it feels good. This is actually the first time I'm shuffling it. It slides against each other well, but it's not super slippery. Anytime you sort of overhand shuffle this way, you're going to end up having to shuffle a while. But can I do it? I'm going to give it a try. It's really, I think it's just too thick. Yeah, I can't even get, I can't get my hands around it. Because it's color-coded, you can sort of see on the edge whether or not you've got a good mix in there. But I can definitely see using this deck. You know what I mean? This isn't just a... I don't buy decks that I'm sort of interested in as a collector generally. The Vampire Tarot is sort of one, but I fully intend on using that too. So I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, but So it has a nice quality to it. I really do like it. So I'm glad I got it. I ended up bidding a little higher than I wanted to on it, but sometimes we do that. Sometimes the thrill of the bidding war gets the better of us. But I know there's at least one. So if you search eBay, I can't remember the seller I got it from, but if you search eBay by this, and you'll see pictures of this. But I know there's one going on right now. So if this deck interests you, it's you can go and bid on it. And I think last time I looked, the highest bid was not that high. So I wound up spending about $50 on this. I was aiming to go no higher than like 40, but I just decided I wanted it. And I did it, and I did that thing that I hate, but it's sort of how you win eBay. I went in at the very last possible second and bid just a little bit more than the person who had outbid me. Which one do I want to look at next? I think I'm going to save my favorite of the next two for last. So, this is not new. This is the Cheimonette or Cheimonette Tarot. I've heard it pronounced both ways. There are walkthroughs of this. If you decide you want me to do one for any reason, then I'm happy to do it. But I feel like they're out there. If you want one, you can probably find someone to do it. I'm gonna zoom in again. So I'm not going to do a whole walkthrough of this. I just sort of wanted to show it. I'm really happy to have this. I'm probably going to edge the sides. I got this deck because I was, I've been sort of particularly interested in non-Rider-Waite-Smith decks. So it comes with a little white book. It's a little white book, but it's actually really sort of beautifully glossy with full color reproductions. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I know that I really like it. I was really drawn to the artwork. I really think it's beautiful. It reminds me a little bit of the Shadowscapes Tarot and Tarot of the Trees, sort of those two decks sort of got together. The whole point of it was not having Rider-Waite-Smith symbology, which I knew I was getting into. Whoops. Oh no, I'm doing it wrong. So there's 3 world cards with this deck. The Hermit is Time. This is another Wheel of Fortune that I really like. One of the things I actually really love about this deck, let me get there actually, I hate that word. So these are the 3 world cards. That wasn't what I was going to show you. I'm going to show you it in a sec. Can you see that? Yeah. So you can kind of choose which version of the world card you use. Or theoretically, you could use all 3. It's such a small thing. Bear with me just a sec. It's a small thing, but to have a pictorial not a pip deck, a pictorial deck that has sort of a scenic route that does not have a bleeding heart on the 3 of Swords makes me really happy. So I'm really excited to have this deck and work with it. The imagery on the miners is actually sort of gentle in a way that I feel like it leaves it open for you to kind of make decisions that aren't necessarily based on Rider-Waite-Smith. It's not a Rider. I mean, there's some hints of Rider-Waite-Smith here and there, but it's not, it's not like super specifically that. So this is a deck that's sort of been on my list for a while, and for whatever reason I didn't get it, and I kept finding reasons not to, and then the other night, actually the same night I won the bid on the Piatnik deck I just showed you, I bought this. And I don't particularly know why now and not earlier, but that's how my brain works. So the last thing I want to show you is not a tarot deck, it's an oracle deck. And I have talked about many times my sort of reluctance with oracle decks, how I haven't really connected with them much. I have a couple, and I think they're beautifully done. The lack of a system in the decks has frequently stopped me using them much, for whatever reason. I started buying oracle decks because I felt like I wanted to kind of break away from the structure of tarot, and then as soon as I didn't have that structure, I missed it. So I went back to it immediately, and then I tried learning Lenormand, and I've talked to you about my struggles with that. I've been sort of cranky about Lenormand in general. I've actually been thinking about Lenormand, and I think one of the mistakes I made, I don't know. I'm going to do another video. There's another deck I'm waiting for that's not a Lenormand deck. It's not a tarot deck. I'm going to talk about it. It's similar, but I'll talk about that then. Anyway, oracle decks and I have had a fraught relationship. I like them, but I don't use them. This next deck I saw on one of Christine and Celeste's videos, and I thought, oh my god, I love that. But I didn't think it was available in the US. And then Kelly from The Truth and Story recently did a walkthrough of it, and she had a link. And I realized I could get it, and I did, and I'm so happy I did. And I posted a picture of it on Instagram. So this is the Oracle of Reflections, L'Oracle Des Reflet, by Celia Melsville. I love it so much. And it's not, I don't know, it just is sort of singing to me, and I'm really happy with it in many ways, and I'm just sort of feeling, it has a Lenormand quality, but it's not. I think one of the things that I actually sort of don't like about Lenormand is only having 36 cards. It's like, I feel like I need a little bit more to get specific enough. So there's been walkthroughs of this deck too. I won't go through the whole thing. It comes in this beautiful box. There's a short little booklet in English and in French. There's just a couple pages dedicated to the card, each language. Each one has a few keywords, and that's it. And there's 56 cards plus a 0, I think. Am I right? Yeah. These are not in order because I have been using them. They're beautifully gold edged. Really thin cardstock, but it shuffles well. It shuffles overhand incredibly well. It's very satisfying. It riffle shuffles well too, but since the cardstock is so thin, you sort of have to be kind of super aware of being careful with it. But it does, I know you're not supposed to riffle shuffle gilded decks, but I actually really, you just get a better shuffle than overhand. And I don't mind a deck getting worn out. I do hope that this one lasts, because I don't have a lot of Oracle decks I use and like this much. I'm sort of tempted, because it is an indie deck, to get another copy, but I keep doing that, and I don't know. And then on the other hand, like, if I have it and I never use it, I could always give it away or sell it, you know what I mean? But it does in the guidebook, it says first edition, which makes me, it's not sold out, like, you can still get this, but it kind of makes me hope that, it'll still be gettable in the foreseeable future. So what I love about this deck is that it reads a lot like Lenormand, I guess, or a lot like I'm getting very messy. It reads a lot like, I don't know. There's a spiritual. There's a spiritual quality to it, but it also has sort of a practicality that I really like. And it just sort of seems to spark. It seems to spark some. Whoops. I thought you're gonna zoom in again. Sorry, I'm still getting used to. I'm using my iPhone to make these videos, and it's hard to get the exposure right. Although the quality I've noticed is better than my last one. So the one thing I will say that I don't love about this deck is that the font is really hard to read. And the cards are numbered 1 through 50 or 0 through 56. The numbers don't really matter all that much to me. The titles kind of do, because the image is great, but the title sort of is a lot of the card as well. So here we have the message, summer, and infertility. So, without asking a question, it's like these things don't mean much. But, you know what I mean? Like, in the context of a question, I found that the cards kind of do. You know what I mean? And there's something sort of... there's something kind of natural about the items she chose to include. Some of them are from tarot, some of them are from Lenormand, some of them are completely her own invention. You know what I mean? And if I were doing a reading, depending on the question, like, we start with a card called the message, so we know that what we're about to hear is something we need to hear. You know what I mean? And we have summer and we have infertility. Infertility. So we've got this thing of, like, the message you need to hear is that what feels hot and warm and sultry is actually not yielding anything for you. And there's just something kind of magical about that. So here we have justice, we have the lotus, and we have construction. And so I would say, like, doing the right thing involves building on your spirituality. There's just something really kind of... I keep wanting to reach for the word effortless, which I don't like, because, effort is not a bad thing. Whoops, that's upside down. So here we have the camel, we have conflict, and we have slow down. How are we doing with the light here? Or even the location. Sorry, I try to do my best with these, but I'm just one guy. So carrying everything with you that you need actually leads to conflict and slows you down in life. So your need to, keep everything with you, carry everything with you in life is causing you to butt heads, and that's slowing down your progress, even though it feels like it's not. I have done my favorite 9-card spread with this. Zoom out and I'll see if I can fit 9 cards here. I don't know if I can. Part of it is because I don't have a super tall tripod. This 9-card spread has become a real go-to for me. It and the Council of 13. And the Council of 13 is really, in a way, just sort of an expansion on this that you read kind of in a different order, but so again, my center card always gives me my theme. Can we see all that? We can. Hey, now. Can we see all of that? Ish. Come down here. Whoa. Alright. So I can't zoom in so you can see the images, but I'll tell you what they are. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You know what I mean? I want to keep this relatively brief by my standards, although we're almost 30 minutes in. So we have the gift, we have spring, construction, mandala, limits. I just said the gift, mutual aid, the lotus, the boat, and serenity. And so the overall theme here is sort of new gifts, right? Because we have spring and we have the gift. So something new, young, fresh, that's a gift right now. And that newness comes from building. So we build something new that allows us to articulate our spirituality. I'm just doing this really fast, but we've got sort of spring, not sort of, we've got spring, construction, and mandala. The guidebook does give instructions or meanings for the cards. I find that I don't really need them. Things like mandala kind of, you know what I mean? Like a mandala doesn't necessarily have a meaning in and of itself. So that's an interesting one. And I think, you know, when I actually, that card came up in a reading I did for the week on Instagram, and I did use the book's definition. What number is that? 28. So refocusing, return to self, also selfishness, selfishness, releasing creativity and handicraft. So, you know, spring. So, I mean, if we were looking at this as a timing thing, we have new gifts. Sort of spring leads us to want to create and build something that ignites our sense of self, ignites our spirituality. You know, if anything's possible, you know, if everything, this is limits, if everything, if everything's important, nothing important. So limits are important for reining in our gifts, and we also need help from outside. Manifesting our spiritual life helps us journey to, you know, a calmer place. And I can, again, go down and across and do all of that. But I find that this deck really... I'm not a person who talks about how decks have personality or qualities. I don't personally, and a lot of people do feel this way. I haven't had the experience where specific decks suit specific kinds of questions or specific kinds of readings or specific moods. Normally when I reach for a deck, it's just the one I want to use at any given point. You know, whatever one I'm in love with or whatever one I just sort of haven't used in a while. You know what I mean? I reach for the deck that just feels right, but it's usually kind of what I want to look at and not necessarily what feels right for that question at any given time. A lot of readers are different, and I totally get that. When it comes to Oracle decks, one of the things that I have found happens for me is that they... I try to be really diplomatic. I guess I'm speaking from my own personal experience or preferences, so I can say I find that they lack practicality or they lack focus. You know what I mean? Probably the one that I like the most is Ciro Marchetti's Oracle of Visions, but because the cards don't have names or don't have titles, it's hard to sort of rein in all that imagery and focus it. I really like Marcella Kroll's mystical, I can't remember the name of it, her deck, that sort of goes in the other case where it's so specifically something that I kind of have a hard time making it mean more than just like the thing that it is. This deck seems to have enough of a boundary, enough limits that I can rein it in, but enough kind of like looseness that I don't feel like, oh, it's so obvious that, you know, limits means limits. Like, what does that mean? Well, in the context of a reading, I feel like limits gives me more to work with. So I would say that if you are someone who, I think if you like Oracle decks, you like this deck. But I think if you're someone who, like me, has been attracted to them but hasn't really found one that kind of sings, like, you may want to look at this one because it really does. There's also something I like about this deck in that the art feels really handmade. You know, there's a video that Kelly from The Truth and Story posted on her page about how the artist, she didn't post it on her page, she posted it in the link of her walkthrough of this deck about how this artist made it. And she tea-dyed paper, and she kind of let the sort of limits or the erosion or whatever, the kind of splotchiness of the ink, kind of tell her what should go there. Doesn't always seem to make sense to me, but it doesn't matter because the deck itself does. So that is L'Oracle Des Reflet, my terrible French accent. Love, 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 love this deck. If you are sort of interested in oracles but haven't found one, if like me, you kind of like the idea of Lenormand but have found it not specific enough in your taste, I would check this out. So anyway, those are 3 decks that I have that have just arrived, and that I'm really enjoying and looking forward to working with. As always, I hope this was fun to watch. Have a great week.